After being revealed back in November of this year, IKEA's new Matter-compatible smart home products are finally available. I got my hands on the Timmerflotte temperature and humidity sensor, both Bilresa remote controls, the Myggspray motion sensor, Klippbok water leak sensor, and the Myggbett contact sensor. And I'm gonna test them on different smart home platforms to see how they hold up. Now, sadly, I couldn't get my hands on the Tuga CO2, temperature, humidity, and PM 2.5 sensor, but your local IKEA might already have these in stock. This is just gonna be a quick overview and feature comparison to give you my initial impressions and thoughts. But without further ado, let's get started. With the exception of the Timmerflotte temperature and humidity sensor, all of the other devices replace existing devices in IKEA's smart home lineup. Common of all of them is their use of Matter over Thread instead of Zigbee that the previous products relied on. They're also all powered by AAA batteries, so no more coin cells. Thank you, IKEA. Using Matter means that you should be able to add the new devices to more smart home platforms right out the gate. So to test this, I've added all of them to my SmartThings hub, Home Assistant, and Google Home through my Nest hub. And of course also IKEA's own IKEA hub. But even if a platform is Matter compatible, it still needs to have implemented support for the specific Matter device that you're trying to add. So let's begin by having a look at the Timmerflotte temperature and humidity sensor. The Timmerflotte is a fairly big temperature and humidity sensor, but in my opinion it looks pretty good. The big differentiator between this and other sensors is the inclusion of an LED display on the front. The display is an 8-segment wide LED display. It's not on all the time, you have to tap it before it lights up, after which it'll show you the current temperature and then fade into the humidity. It's only rated for indoor use, but it can be used in humid areas like the bathroom. To toggle between Celsius and Fahrenheit, IKEA has placed a switch in the battery compartment that instantly toggles between the two units. So it's actually pretty nice not having to rely on an app in order to configure the kind of units that you want to use. This means that you could, in theory, just ignore the smart home connectivity and use it as a regular temperature and humidity sensor. To set it in pairing mode, you hold the pairing button on the back and the display will begin to count down, after which a small LED will begin to pulse. And from here, it's just like adding any other Matter device. You open the app and scan the Matter code printed on the sensor. And after a few moments, the smart home platform of choice will hopefully have found the device. Adding it to SmartThings gives us just what we would expect. The temperature and humidity shows up with no problems at all, and it can be used in automations. The same can be said about Home Assistant, Google Home, and of course IKEA's own IKEA hub. Really, it's a temperature and humidity sensor with an LED display that functions great with all of these smart home platforms that I've tried. There's really not much else to say. IKEA's new contact sensor Myggbett, or mosquito bite in English, really IKEA, replaces the old Parasol contact sensor. They look very similar to the old model, but has a more boxy look. The biggest difference is the fact that you no longer need a screwdriver to get access to the battery compartment, and that the reset button is also placed on the front instead of the back. This sensor is the only one of all of the new devices that only has the numerical Matter code and not the QR code printed on the body. So you'll have to manually input the code or scan the QR code in the manual. It's not really a problem, it's just odd. And once again, it pairs perfectly with SmartThings and Home Assistant, where the status is shown almost instantly. It also pairs without any problems in Google Home, but the status is a bit slower to reflect. The IKEA also obviously functions without any problems. Common of all of the devices and using the IKEA is the obvious lack of automation options in the IKEA HomeSmart app. It can only really turn lights and smart plugs on and off and send you notifications, and that's really about it. So to really take advantage of the devices, I highly recommend adding the IKEA hub to something like Google Home, the Apple Home app, or a Homey hub to kind of get the full experience of being able to create automations and doing all sorts of things in your smart home with these new IKEA devices. The Myggspray motion sensor is replacing the old valve motion sensor. It's been given a new round design, and where you would previously find buttons for changing the detection time and configuring the light sensor, you'll now only find a pairing button. So, adding it to SmartThings, Home Assistant and Google Home gives you access to the motion state and brightness level of the room that you've placed the sensor in. It has a cooldown time of 25 seconds compared to the 20 seconds of the old sensor. So it's a bit of a downgrade, but it's not too bad. The light sensor also only updates when motion is detected. So it's not really useful for automations that requires the brightness level to be updated automatically all the time. The sensor has a range of about 10 meters with a fairly limited 60 degrees detection angle. But at 5 meters, the detection angle is a more useful 120 degrees according to IKEA. During testing, I found this to be pretty accurate. I've also found the sensor to be pretty reliable and also fast at detection motion, and also reflecting that in the Home Assistant and SmartThings and Google Home app. But once again, the Google Home app is the slowest of the bunch. Okay, so to be frank, there's really not much to say about IKEA's new leak detector. It looks very similar to the old Bilresa water leak detector, except that it looks kinda cheap. I mean, the design and the plastic just feels cheap compared to the old, kind of more robust design. At least in my opinion. Well, I guess the sensor is probably gonna be placed out of sight anyways, so it doesn't really matter, I guess. It still senses leaks using 2 metal prongs on the bottom with no ability to adjust the sensitivity. It also still features a really loud alarm that, annoyingly, you can't turn off. But adding it to SmartThings, Home Assistant, Google Home and the IKEA, it works without any problems no matter which platform I use it on. Really, that's all there is to it. During my limited time testing the leak sensor, it seems pretty reliable and consistent. It does what it's supposed to do, and it seems like it does it well. So the new Bilresa remote controls comes in 2 variants, one with 2 buttons and one with a button and a rotary dial. So these are the first of the new devices that I think is a big downgrade compared to the previous versions. It's also the first of the new devices that I've encountered some big problems with. Let's begin with the dual button version. First off, it's a lot smaller than the old Rudrat and Somrig remote, which I think is a positive thing. But unfortunately, the remote no longer supports adding your own icons behind a cover, like the Somrig shortcut remote did. The 2 buttons can also be difficult to distinguish between, since there are no markings showing which button is which. Instead, the indent on one of the buttons is slightly bigger than the other indent. Adding it to the different systems works without any issues. Well, except for Google Home, that still doesn't support buttons. Seriously, Google? Well, in both Home Assistant and SmartThings, you get the option to trigger an automation on a single press, a double press, and a press and hold. So in practice, you can trigger up to 6 different automations using this one remote. In IKEA's own HomeSmart app, the remote can be used to turn on and off devices or trigger shortcuts. I have come across a small issue in Home Assistant. Sometimes, for some reason, the second button refuses to register a single click. It registers a double click and a press and hold every time with no problems. And SmartThings also doesn't have this issue where a single press is sometimes missed. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's just me. Tell me in the comments if you've added it to Home Assistant and have experienced no problems. So while the 2-button Bilresa remote didn't cause me that many troubles, the same can't be said about the Bilresa with a rotary dial. Even though the remote pairs with the SmartThings hub and Home Assistants without any major issues, neither platform registers any of the actions on the remote. Pressing the rotary dial is simply ignored. Rotating the dial doesn't show up at all, and pressing the body of the remote is ignored as well. I didn't expect the rotation to be supported, since rotation currently isn't a supported meta action. But I did expect the button presses to function. Okay, so I'm recording this after I've recorded all of my other commentary on the Bilresa with a rotary dial. For some reason it now kinda works in Home Assistant and in SmartThings. At least it has similar functionality to if you added it to the IKEA HomeSmart app. And what I mean by that is that you can now use the button on the body itself to toggle between the 3 different groups. Each group will then activate a different button press when you press the rotary dial. It's important to remember that the rotation of this dial still doesn't work in Home Assistant or in SmartThings, but only in the IKEA Home Smart app. Adding it to the IKEA hub yields better results, as you would expect. From here you can configure the remote to control lights, plugs and also speakers. Pressing the dial will turn on or off or play and pause the device, while rotating it will dim or adjust the volume. The really neat part is the fact that the remote can control up to 4 different device groups. You can toggle between these groups by pressing the body of the remote. A white LED then shows you what group you are currently controlling. But even if you add it to the IKEA hub, the hardware of the remote leaves some to be desired. I especially don't like the rotary dial. It's extremely slippery and trying to rotate it can be difficult and borderline impossible if it's laying flat on a table. IKEA really should have added some texture on the dial to give some grip. I have to press really hard to manipulate it. And for this reason, I sometimes accidentally activate a press instead of rotating it. This was just a very early look at the new products, and a lot might change in the near future. I'll keep using the devices to get a better feel for the long-term usability of all of them. If you're interested in following along, make sure to follow me on my social media, linked in the description. There's also more Matter-compatible devices coming early next year. Amongst them are the Alps-Tuga CO2 and PM2.5 sensor that I've already mentioned, but there's also new smart plugs coming, both for indoor and outdoor use. If you have any questions, be sure to ask away in the comments and I'll try to answer as best as I can. Otherwise, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.